Chapter 321, Options 1. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Li Kixuan, the children, and the teachers boarded the buses. Before they left, Zhao Lijai gave them some dry food and water, in case they couldn't find any on the way. After you arrive at the base, report immediately, Jin Zuyan said as he handed a map to Li Kixuan. Taking the map, Li Kixuan replied with a smile, understood. Turning around, Jin Zuyan looked at his team members and said, "Everyone, we will depart now." With his order, everyone boarded the armored vehicles and drove out of the school. Inside the cafeteria, the staff watched them leave, and one of them asked, "Now that they have left, what should we do?" "We will stay in this place. Since they already built the metal wall and repaired the gate, we can recruit more people to work for us. If they want to stay in this safe place, they have to pay with supplies," another staff member replied. After leaving the school, Li Kixuan went toward Linen City while the Phantom team went to the town center. They didn't take supplies such as food, water, or weapons, but took away the generators, machines, tools, and other important things used to build the base. When they found a big gas station, Zhao Lijai took the underground tanks into her space. With so many machines, the daily usage of oil would be very high after the base was built. The moment the Phantom team members saw her take away so many massive underground oil tanks without even sweating, they finally realized how strong their sister-in-law's mental power was. Compared to her, even Feng Yun was nothing to mention. Along the way, they cleared the wandering zombies and those trapped in buildings. With them clearing the area, the survivors who were hiding finally dared to come out and search for supplies. After they got the supplies, they noticed the metal wall in the distance as it reflected the sunlight. Seeing the tall wall, everyone walked there to find a safe place to stay. With the Phantom team's intervention, the small county town was moving toward becoming a small base. Meanwhile, in Linen City base, Zun Qi and his team were having a meeting. One of them stood up and reported, "Captain, the colonels and their parties are demanding to meet with you." Hearing this, Zun Qi raised his eyebrows and asked, "Have they been following the tasks assigned to them?" The soldier nodded and replied, "Some of them obediently did their assigned tasks, but most of them tried to slack off and bribed the guards." Zun Qi let out a chuckle and said, "Bring them all to me." Accepting the order, several soldiers went to escort the colonels and their subordinates to the meeting room. 20 minutes later, the soldiers came out of the car and walked to the outskirts, where the wall was being built. When the guards saw the soldiers, one of them walked over, saluted, and asked, "Sir, what brings you here today?" "Captain asked us to escort the colonels and their people for questioning." The moment he said this, the guards exchanged glances and went to get the people. When they returned, one of the colonels asked, "What does Zun Qi want from me?" "Colonel, you will know when you meet with the captain," the soldier replied before he gestured to his team to take the people away. Before they left, the soldier turned to the guards and said, "Just a reminder, keep your hands clean. The captain won't keep disloyal and corrupt people." As soon as he said this, the guards turned pale instantly. Most of them were recruited by the base to supervise the wall building and were not trained soldiers. While they were ability users, they still couldn't win against guns. Therefore, they didn't dare to openly use their authority and power to suppress others with the soldiers patrolling. But they accepted bribes, thinking that getting a little benefit for themselves was okay. Now, with the soldiers' reminder, they finally realized that everything was under the captain's surveillance and control. If they continued their corrupt practices, they might be removed from their posts in mild cases, or even killed in the worst-case scenario. After another 20 minutes, the soldiers returned to the meeting room with the colonels and their people. As they entered the room, the colonels glared at Zun Qi, but no one dared to scold him openly. After all, they still remembered how he killed 2 of them without batting an eye. "Captain, we have brought the people," the soldier reported. Zun Qi nodded and gestured for the soldier to stand to the side. Afterward, he looked at the colonels and their people for a while before he asked, "Everyone, I believe all of you already realize what is going on in this base." Hearing this, they didn't know what his intention was, but they were sure it wasn't something good for them. So one of the colonels asked, "Zun Qi, what do you want?" Tapping his fingers on the desk, Zun Qi said, "I hate it when people try to be smart behind my back. Now that this base is under my control, I will never let anyone go against my authority or violate the rules. So I will give you 2 options." "What options?" Zun Qi raised one finger and said, "First, you can continue to stay in my base, but you will no longer hold any military position or title. You will be treated the same as the ordinary survivors. Raising another finger, he continued, "Second, you are free to leave this base, but I will not give you any supplies or weapons. Whether you can survive out there or not depends on yourself." The moment he finished his words, they were stunned. They had never considered relinquishing their military power or leaving the base without protection. Therefore, when they heard the options, they didn't want to choose either. But when the colonels met Sun Qi's cold gaze, they understood that the best option was to leave. With someone as ruthless and decisive as him as the base commander, they might lose their lives if they insisted on staying and challenging his authority. At this moment, they only exchanged glances but didn't discuss the matter with each other. Based on their understanding of one another, the moment they faced danger, they wouldn't hesitate to use others as shields to save their own lives. Therefore, going together might not be a good choice. After a while, Sun Qi raised his eyebrows and asked, "Have you all made up your minds?" Noticing the impatience in his voice, one of the colonels said, "My men and I will leave the base." Sun Qi nodded at his words and said, "Very well, Hanley, you will send them off personally. Make sure they don't take anything from our base." Standing behind him when Hanley replied, "Understood." With one of them making a decision, the rest followed one after another. "I will leave the base too." As the colonels made their decisions, some of their subordinates were unwilling to leave. Although they had to do heavy work every day, they had warm meals 3 times a day and a safe place to stay. If they left, they couldn't be sure they would have the same comfortable life as now. What's more, with the colonels, they would still have to protect them and find supplies for them without getting paid. After considering the pros and cons, one of the subordinates suddenly said, "Captain Zun, I don't want to leave. I choose to stay and work for the base." With one person voicing his opinion, the rest of the subordinates raised their opinions too. Unlike the colonels who chose to leave, all the soldiers under them chose to stay. Seeing this, the corner of Sun Qi's lips lifted. He had guessed this outcome. With how well they were treated by the base, it would be impossible for them to go with those old men. While he wanted to chase away the useless politicians, he still wanted to keep the soldiers. After all, they were only following orders and hadn't made any mistakes so far. After being tempered for another month, he planned to recruit them as guards. It would be a waste to use trained soldiers as coolies to build the wall. While Sun Qi was pleased with this outcome, the colonels were enraged. They glared at their subordinates and shouted angrily, "Bunch of white-eyed wolves, I treated you well, and this is how you repay me." The soldiers didn't avoid their gazes, as they didn't feel what they did was wrong. They had followed orders even when it was against their conscience before. Now that they were given a choice, why should they follow these corrupt people? Sun Qi felt a headache as they continued shouting and said, "Enough. Hanley, escort these old men out and make sure they leave the base's perimeter," he added coldly. Understood, when Hanley nodded and glanced at the guards. Receiving the signal, the guards grabbed the colonels and dragged them out. After they left, the meeting room finally returned to tranquility. Sun Qi rubbed his temple and said, "Now that all of you have made your decision to stay and work for the base, you won't be treated unfairly. As long as you finish your assigned tasks without a problem, after a month, all of you who meet the requirements will be promoted as guards. Your salary and benefits will be the same as the rest of the guards hired by the base." The moment the soldiers heard this, their eyes lit up with joy. They knew they had made the right decision by staying at the base. They saluted Sun Qi and replied in unison, "Captain, we will do our best to prove our loyalty and protect the base." Sun Qi nodded and said, "You can go back to your tasks now." Understood. The soldiers returned to the outskirts and continued building the wall. But with the captain's promise, they no longer felt the future was bleak. Now, with a goal in mind, they worked harder than usual and improved the speed of the wall construction. After leaving the meeting room, Wen Hanley and the soldiers escorted the colonels to the cars. As they drove out of the base, one of the colonels said, "Wen Hanley, you have followed Sun Qi for so long, but he still treats you like his obedient dog. Are you willing to serve him for the rest of your life?" When Hanley continued looking at the road, without even giving the old man a glance, he knew very well how his captain had treated him over the years. When everyone was recruiting ability users and replacing their trusted aides, his captain never removed any of their members and continued trusting them with important matters. While they didn't go on missions outside the base, the importance they held as they managed the base was far above the soldiers who went out on missions. No matter how strong those teams were, they still had to report to him. With his current position, aside from becoming the base commander, there was no position higher than his. As someone who had followed Sun Chi since he joined the military, when Hanley was not someone whose loyalty could be swayed with only a few words. Instead of harboring discontent toward his captain, he looked at the colonel with disdain. With this level of intelligence, if not for his powerful backing, it would have been impossible for this old man to reach the position of colonel, even if he lived for another 100 years. After they drove for half an hour, the soldiers parked their cars on the roadside and got out of the cars one after another. They opened the back seat doors and dragged them out without saying a word. After the colonels were dragged out of the cars, the soldiers returned to the vehicles. Before leaving, Wen Hanley turned to the colonels and said with a meaningful smile, "Gentlemen, I wish you a smooth journey to the capital. Good luck." Before they could say anything, Wen Hanley and the soldiers drove back to the base. This was the safe area around the base. Beyond this 500-meter radius, there was no guarantee they wouldn't encounter any zombies. When they realized the dangerous situation they were in, their faces turned pale. They looked around and saw several shops on the roadside. While the shops were small, they should have some weapons inside. Although most of them hadn't been to the battlefield since taking office, they still knew basic survival skills. Therefore, they decided to travel together for now. After they dropped off the old men's group, when Hanley returned to the base and reported to Sun Chi. At the same time, several groups of survivors arrived at the base and were lining up to register. Out of hundreds of people, Lin Fei, who was wearing a baseball cap, wiped the sweat from his forehead and fanned himself with his hand while saying, "Jian Zikin, do you think this base is as good as the hearsay?" "I don't know, but it's better to find a safe place rather than keep traveling. We don't know what will happen in the future, and having a place to call home is always good," Jian Zikin replied as he handed a bottle of water to his sister. Jian Huan drank the water before adding, "We heard the news from the soldiers we met before. I doubt they would lie to us. After all, to enter the base, we still have to pay an entrance fee. With rules in place, this base should be more organized compared to those survivor camps." As they chatted, the people around them heard their words. Some of them had come after encountering soldiers who went out to clear zombies or find supplies, while others had simply seen many people heading this way and followed the flow. Many of them had already used up their supplies and were currently hopping to find a path to survival by coming to this place. So when they heard they had to pay to enter the base, they panicked and became anxious. But even so, they were unwilling to leave after lining up for hours. When everyone was on the verge of having a heat stroke after standing under the sun for so long, several groups of soldiers came out of the base, each group carrying a large, empty water tank. Under everyone's gaze, Gu Sheos said, "Comrade, you can put the water tanks near the tent. The weather is too hot. I don't want to get tanned and have my girlfriend despise me." When the soldiers heard his words, they rolled their eyes inwardly. They wondered why Phantom team members liked to boast about having a girlfriend. Does having a girlfriend make them stronger or more handsome? Perhaps if their captain also found a girlfriend, they would get one too. So, should they urge Captain Zun to find a girl? After repeatedly draining and recovering his energy pool had increased, and now he could produce around 2,500 liters of water before running out of energy. Since his team didn't need that much water, he would usually go to the base's reservoir area to fill up the water. On one hand, it helped him improve his ability, and on the other, he got paid 1 crystal core for every 10 liters of water. One day, he could produce 5,000 liters of water, which allowed him to earn 500 crystal cores, while he only needed 8 water-type crystal cores to recover his energy. With his rate of earning money, he would soon become a rich master. Unaware of the soldiers' wild thoughts, Gu Sheos had them remove the water tank lids and raised his hand. In a few seconds, a massive water ball floated above the water tank. With a flick of his wrist, the water ball flew into the tank. Each tank could hold 500 liters of water, and each water ball equaled 100 liters. He created 5 water balls and filled the tank. They brought out 5 tanks, and after he filled all of them, Gu Sheos felt a sharp pain in his head. While he could now produce 2,500 liters of water, he had still hit his limit. Noticing his pale face, Rongmo went to support him, and the two of them went into the tent. Inside the tent, she took out several water-type crystal cores and handed them to him while saying, "Sheos, you shouldn't push yourself to the limit every time. What if you get injured because of this?" "Without pushing the limit, how could I get stronger and protect you?" Gu Sheos replied with a smile as he absorbed the crystal's energy. Holding his girlfriend's hand, he added, All this time, it's been you who protected me. As your man, I want to become stronger so I can protect you. I don't want to always stand behind you. When Rongmo heard this, she stopped persuading him. She knew that they had to grow stronger if they wanted to live well in this world. Without strength, they had no right to talk about the future. With this thought, she made up his mind and said, Sheos, I want to join the base's team and go out on a mission. The moment he heard this, Gu Sheos refused instantly. No. She had expected his reaction, so she didn't get angry. Instead, she said, Sheos, just as you want to grow stronger to protect me, I want to grow stronger to stand by your side. I will go with the soldiers, and it will be a team created by the base. With them under Captain Zun, and with my identity as a phantom team member, they won't dare do anything to me. Seeing that her boyfriend was still unwilling to agree to her, Rongmo added, Sheos, when I go out I won't go alone. My cousin will go with me, and I promise you, I will be careful and come back safely. Noticing her determination, Gu Sheos could only let out a long sigh and say, You must protect yourself well. If you put yourself in danger, I will never let you go out again. Even though he was domineering and quite controlling, Rongmo didn't mind. Since he could accept her flaws, she wouldn't reject him because of his flaws. She leaned closer to him, kissed his pale lips and said, Okay. Satisfied with her kiss, Gu Sheos got bolder and asked, Girlfriend, are you bribing me with only one kiss? Rongmo chuckled and said, Boyfriend, you are still absorbing the energy. Behave. As the crystal in his palm turned into fine dust, Gu Sheos reached out, pulled her closer and held her nape. Then, he leaned in and kissed her for a long time. While they were sharing an intimate moment in the tent, the soldiers were busy outside. Holding a megaphone, a soldier said, Everyone, line up and prepare your water containers. Each person will receive 2 liters of water for free. The moment the survivors heard this, they were surprised and delighted. Water sources were polluted by the zombie virus, and mineral water was limited. To get water, they usually had to buy it from a water-type ability user. Not to mention the high price, it was rare to find one willing to sell to them. This was the first time they had seen someone who could produce 5 tanks of water and was willing to give it out for free. As they lined up, Jian Huan said, This base's commander is truly generous and smart. Sister, why do you say that? Jian Zikin asked. Because of the entrance fee, many survivors cancelled their plans to join the base. No one knows what the situation inside is like. What if we pay the fee, enter, and find out it's no different from any other survivor camp? Jian Huan asked. It's risky, but there is no free lunch in this world. Even if the situation inside is the same as other places, at least this place has guards and a high wall. The security should be better, Lin Fei said. Jian Huan nodded and said, Even so, not everyone can afford the high entrance fee, so they hesitate. Sister, what does that have to do with the base giving out free water? Jian Zikin asked. Look at the people around us, Jian Huan said. Hearing this, Jian Zikin and Lin Fei looked around and noticed that the previous anxiety and worry on the survivors' faces had disappeared. Now, they were full of smiles and hope. This act of giving out water for free shows that the base cares for the people. While it's only water and might cost nothing to the base, for many, this is a lifeline. After receiving the base's kindness, whether or not they get a good job later, they won't betray the base, Jian Huan explained. After hearing her words, both Lin Fei and Jian Zikin finally understood how cunning the base's commander was. By giving out a little water, he had already bought the people's hearts, even before they entered the base. While the survivors praised the base commander as generous and kind, Zun Qi, who was busy making phone calls to the surrounding survivor camps, knew nothing about it. The idea of giving out water for free was Gu Sheos. He had no intention of gaining a good reputation at all, as he simply wanted to train his ability, and at the same time, help the children and elderly. He could ignore the adults, but he had a soft spot for children and old people. They reminded him of his late brother and grandparents. At this moment, Zun Qi had already finished a call and crossed another name off the list. Pinching the bridge of his nose, he let out a sigh and said, These people really don't know what's good for them. Captain, since they didn't appreciate your goodwill, why bother warning them? When the next rain comes, they will face the consequences, one of the soldiers said. Zun Qi picked up his cup and drank some water before replying, I'm not doing this for them but for the commoners. If we can save even one person, that's one less zombie. Not only does it reduce the danger we face, but it also increases humanity's overall chance of survival. Captain, since they have refused your offer, what should we do now? Wen Hanli asked. Sun Qi thought for a moment and said, "Since we can't persuade the higher-ups, then we can only persuade the people. Hanley, how much supplies do we have right now?" Opening his notebook, when Hanley replied, "With the addition of the supplies given by Captain Jin before they left, we have enough to support 100,000 people for 6 months. "How about the water?" Sun Qi asked again. Gu Shao's, a member of the Phantom team, is able to provide 5,000 liters of water daily. With him joining the team, we have no problem with our water supply at all. The moment he said this, everyone was surprised. After they posted the recruitment notice, a total of 37 water-type ability users had registered. Most of them were level 0 ability users, and only 2 had reached level 1. The level 1 users could provide 500 liters of water daily, while the rest could only manage around 200 liters. Compared to Gu Shao's, who was also a level 1 ability user, the disparity in their energy pools and abilities was like the difference between heaven and earth. While everyone was shocked by the news, Sun Qi remained as calm as a monk. He had learned from Wei Wying that Zhao Lijai's water-type ability was much more powerful than Gu Shao's. Even Chen Qianfeng, another Phantom team member who was stronger than Gu Shao's, was still weaker in comparison. In the entire base, perhaps no one could surpass her. When the soldiers noticed how calm their captain was, one of them asked, "Captain, aren't you surprised by his strength?" Sun Qi smiled and replied, "What is there to be surprised about? Compared to him, Chen Qianfeng can produce more than 8,000 liters of water daily, and compared to both of them, Zhao Lijai is able to produce more than 30,000 liters before she runs out of energy." As soon as he said this, Wen Hanley exclaimed, "How could that be possible? I have never seen it myself, but Wei Wying has. Since he witnessed it, the information is credible," Sun Qi said. With his words, the soldiers' respect for the Phantom team increased by severalfold. It was no wonder they had survived so many zombie hordes. Each of their members was a monster. After a moment of silence, Sun Qi said, "Hanley, how many teams did we send out to clear the zombies?" "Captain, we send 10 teams every day to clear out the zombies near the base and expand our perimeter. At this moment, the area within a 500-meter radius of our base is clear," Wen Hanley replied. Sun Qi thought for a moment and said, "Send 5 teams with 5 members each to spread the word about our base recruiting people. We need to expand our base and build a stronger wall. After we clear an area within a 200-kilometer radius from our base, we will surround it with a higher wall." "Captain, we don't have anyone who knows about engineering. Even if we want to build the wall, we won't know how to build it stronger. Since those talents didn't come to us, we have to go out and find them. Have the small teams visit the surrounding survivor camps first and recruit more workers. The payment will be equal to that of those registered as our base's residences," Sun Qi replied. When they heard his words, they understood their captain's intention. Sun Qi opened the base design and spread it across the desk. Since they couldn't enclose the perimeter with a high wall directly, they built the wall from the inside out, slowly expanding the base. At this moment, they had built 3 layers of walls. Each wall was 5 meters high and 2 meters wide. The innermost part of the base was the central ring, where important personnel and their families lived. The second ring housed key buildings. The third ring served as a residential area for survivors and ability users. To improve the base's economy, they designated an area specifically for the exchange market at the third ring. Now, they were in the process of building the wall outside the fourth ring. Each ring extended 20 kilometers from the inner area to the wall. They planned to build 10 layers of walls around the base. "How is the construction progress?" Sun Qi asked. "The fourth wall is only at 20% completion," Wen Hanley replied. Sun Qi recalled Jin Zuyan's words and calculated the time. At their current pace, it would be impossible to build 6 more layers in just 2 months. Hanley increased the number of workers. "Also, send teams to collect supplies from other areas," he said. "Understood." After the brief meeting, when Hanley and the soldiers left the meeting room to carry out their tasks. As for Sun Qi, he made a phone call using his satellite phone. A moment later, the call was picked up, and Jin Zuyan's voice came through the receiver. "Sun Qi, why did you call me?" he asked. "Jin Zuyan, did your member Gu Shao's contact you?" Sun Qi asked. "What's wrong?" "I received a report from my men that your member brought someone from Yunshan City and also brought back some grains. I want to borrow your members to find more supplies," Sun Qi replied. "You can just ask them directly. I'm busy now," Jin Zuyan said. Just then, Zun Qi heard the roaring of zombies on the other end, followed by the sound of an explosion. "You are in the middle of a battle and still picked up the call?" Zun Qi asked in surprise. "I thought you had something important to discuss. Next time, don't bother me with unimportant matters." Just after he said this, Jin Zuyan saw the level 4 zombie attacking his fiancée and shouted, "Aitg." Boom! A black fireball flew at high speed and hit the zombie, sending it flying and hitting the nearby building. As he put the satellite phone back into his pocket, he leaped toward his fiancée and asked, "Aitg, are you okay?" Zhao Lijai had been hit by the zombie's attack several times and suffered an internal injury. Blood flowed from the corner of her lips. Using the back of her hand to wipe it away, she shook her head and said, "Brother Yan, I'm fine." As soon as she said this, the zombie climbed out of the debris and raised its head, letting out a roar. "Roarer." "Captain, it's calling for more zombies," Chin Luzi said as he checked the map in his mind. The scattered red dots within a 500-meter radius were moving in their direction. Hearing this, Jin Zuyan said, "Block the road and clear the zombies." Understood, the Wen brothers nodded and built a metal wall to block the road, giving them a safe space. Then he turned to his fiancée and said, "Aitg, go help our members. I will handle this zombie." Zhao Lijai knew her fiancé was strong and capable of killing this zombie, but her instincts warned her that this one was different from the others. She shook her head and said, "Brother Yan, there's something wrong with this zombie. I'm not comfortable with you fighting it alone." Seeing the concern in her eyes, Jin Zuyan thought for a moment and said, "Then make sure to protect yourself first." Understood, Zhao Lijai nodded. "Roar!" After the zombie let out another roar, it rushed toward them. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan raised his longsword to meet its attack. Clang! The sound of metal colliding echoed through the area as his longsword blocked the zombie's sharp claws. Standing not far from him, Zhao Lijai held her dagger and focused her energy into it. As the dagger took the shape of a long scythe, she bent her knees and leaped into the air. Using gravity to increase her attack power, she spun midair and aimed the sharp blade of the scythe at the zombie's head. Whoosh crack! With the additional force, her attack power increased by half, but even with that added power, it only managed to leave some cracks on the zombie's earth shield. With both hands blocking their attacks, the zombie opened its mouth and faced her. Seeing this, Zhao Lijai's heart skipped a beat. Before the zombie could execute its next move, she flipped her body and kicked the back of the zombie's head. Duag! Due to her interruption, the earth spear was stuck inside the zombie's mouth and pierced its jaw instead. Using the force of the kick, Zhao Lijai leaped backward, creating several meters of distance from the zombie. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan slashed his longsword horizontally. Crash! Roar! The zombie let out an angry roar as one of its arms was cut off. Before it could react, Jin Zuyan swung his longsword again and cut off the zombie's head. As the zombie's body fell to the ground, its head rolled toward Zhao Lijai. Feeling curious, she reached out and muttered softly, "Collect." The next moment, she felt that her space was responding to her, but she failed to store the zombie's head in her space. Noticing this, she recalled the situation where she had been able to pull Mo Bingxiu and Fu Guari into her space. Both of them seemed to have retained their memories and consciousness as humans. Was that the reason why she could pull them in, while she couldn't pull the zombie into her space? Does one of the requirements was having a consciousness? While she was lost in thought, Jin Zuyan had already burned the zombie's corpse into ashes and walked over. This time he didn't burn the head directly, but used his longsword to roll it over. When he saw the stitch marks on the back of the zombie's head, his eyes flashed coldly. After a moment, he burned the zombie's head and picked up 2 crystal cores. One was a transparent crystal, while the other was golden-colored. Seeing the crystals, Zhao Lijai was surprised. From her knowledge in her previous life, there were indeed several dual-type mutant zombies that appeared, but that was in the 2nd year of the apocalypse. Right now, it hasn't even been a month since the beginning of the apocalypse. How could these kinds of zombies already appear? Did it have something to do with Fu Guari? Noticing her frown, Jin Zuyan said, "Aitg, this matter should be kept secret for now." There was a stitch mark on the back of the zombie's head. Someone must have done an experiment using people or zombies. Until we find more clues, we can't startle the snake. Hearing this, Zhao Lijai looked at her fiancé and asked, "Brother Yan, do you know something about this?" Jin Zuyan nodded and said, "In the past, most of my team members didn't make it and perished at the beginning of the apocalypse. I thought they had died, but in the 6th year of the apocalypse, I met them again. How could that be? Zhao Lijai was shocked. When I met them again, they were no longer human, Jin Zuyan said through gritted teeth. Noticing the hatred in his voice, Zhao Lijai reached out to hold his hand and said, Brother Yan, that won't happen this time. Feeling the warmth of her hand, Jin Zuyan snapped out of his thoughts and nodded. After killing the zombie, the two of them joined the team members and cleared out the rest of the zombies. While the dual-type mutant zombie was at level 4, due to the artificial process, its power was only equal to that of a level 3 zombie. As the Phantom team was busy killing zombies, Li Kixuan was staring at the children. He was sitting in one of the buses, together with 30 children and a teacher. At first, the children were sitting in their seats and behaving obediently, but after several hours, they started to become impatient. They had been trapped for almost a month inside a dark room. Now that they could come out, they were livelier than before. Some of the children even dared to look out the window and let out a gasp when they saw the zombies. The teacher driving the car was tense, as he had to avoid hitting the zombies. Even though the Wen brothers had reinforced the bus and could withstand some damage from crashing into zombies, the teacher couldn't help but feel nauseous when he saw the rotten flesh and black blood splattered on the windshield. The children saw that the zombies were unable to catch up with the buses and became bolder. When one of them wanted to open the window, Li Kixuan said, If you open the window, I will throw you out. When the boy heard this, he was stunned and looked at him. The moment he met his icy gaze, he turned pale and quickly returned to his seat, no longer daring to move around. The teacher noticed this from the rearview mirror and glanced at Li Kixuan. This man didn't look like a good person, like his team members. When he met his gaze, he felt a heavy pressure, as if he would be killed if he made a mistake. While he was afraid of him, the teacher still said, Everyone, be good and stay in your seat. When we find a place to rest, we will have our lunch, okay? As soon as they heard that they could eat, the children no longer felt scared and replied in unison, Okay. Lower your voices, Li Kixuan said while pinching the bridge of his nose. The next moment, the children covered their mouths and stared at him in fear. Seeing them like this, Li Kixuan let out a long sigh. He hated children the most. They were noisy, naughty, and annoying. If not because he didn't want those people to find out that he was still alive, he wouldn't have offered to escort these brats back to the base. In the afternoon, the group finally found a safe place near the border to rest. As they came out of the buses, the children followed their teachers closely. Without Qin Luzi with them, Li Kixuan said, Stay here, I will go check the situation inside first. The teachers, holding blades, stood on 4 sides with the children in the center. They nodded and moved toward the wall. With a wall behind them, they didn't have to worry about being attacked from behind. Taking out his iron fan, Li Kixuan opened the door and walked inside. With a wave of his hand, several wisps of blue flame floated around him, illuminating the dark room. Crit! The moment he heard the sound, he said, Who's there? Come out. He was sure that the one hiding was human. After all, if it had been a zombie, it would have rushed at him as soon as he entered the building. Seeing that the one hiding was still not coming out, he added, If you don't come out, don't blame me for killing you when I find you. The moment he said this, a pair of hands appeared from behind the counter. Soon after, a woman stood up and said, Brother, please don't kill me. I came here first, so you can't chase me out. Li Kixuan noticed the dark, red blood on her arm and raised his eyebrows. Tell your friends to come out too. The woman was taken aback and glanced at the people hiding behind the counter. As they exchanged glances, a wisp of blue flame flew toward the woman at high speed. Seeing this, the woman let out a yelp and dodged to the side, but no matter where she ran, the flame followed her closely. When her back touched the wall and she had nowhere to escape, Li Kixuan flicked his finger, and the wisp of flame shot toward the counter. Ouch! Instead of hitting the woman, the blue flame struck the people hiding behind the counter. While they were busy extinguishing the flames burning their clothes, Li Kixuan had already appeared behind them. He put the sharp edge of his iron fan to the neck of one of the men and said, You should have listened when I was talking nicely. As he pressed the edge into his neck, the man felt the pain and quickly said, Comrade, please spare my life. Just as the edge of the fan drew blood, Li Kixuan stopped and said, Come out. The man's back and forehead were covered with cold sweat. One more push and his veins would have been cut. As they came out one after another, Li Kixuan noticed one of them was injured, and he was already showing signs of mutation. Seeing this, he said, "That person is mutating. If you don't kill him now, he will turn into a zombie in less than 15 minutes. The moment he said this, the woman quickly stood in front of the man and said, "My husband won't turn into a zombie. You can't kill him." Hearing this, Lee Kixuan said, "Since you don't want to kill him, you have to leave this place." "Brother, we found this place first. If you want to stay, we will let you have the second floor," one of them said. When he heard this, Lee Kixuan chuckled and replied with a hint of amusement, "I'm not discussing this with you. Either kill him, leave, or die together with him. You can only choose one." The group looked at the sky outside and saw that it was starting to darken. If they left now, they would only have 2 or 3 hours to find another place. After fighting zombies all day, they were exhausted, and there was no guarantee they wouldn't run into another high-level zombie. As they weighed the pros and cons, they glanced at the wounded man and the woman. Noticing their gazes, the woman said, "Cousin, you can't chase us away. If not for my husband blocking that zombie's attack, you would have been killed." Lee Kixuan was not someone who had the patience to listen to family drama. Since they couldn't choose, he would help them decide. Before the woman's cousin could answer, he grabbed their collars and threw them out one after another. Even the woman and her injured husband were not spared. "Zark! Ouch, my back! Zark!" As they were thrown out and hit the ground, the group let out a cry. When they stood up, they looked at Lee Kixuan with fear and shock. They were ability users. Even if they weren't very strong, they were not as weak as ordinary people. But despite that, this man had thrown them out like weak chickens. That alone showed how strong he was. Since it was impossible to win against him, and the woman was unwilling to abandon her husband, they could only leave. Outside the building, the children and teachers were startled when they saw a group of people suddenly being thrown out one after another. When they saw Lee Kixuan walking out with wisps of blue flames floating around him, they felt like they were looking at King Yama himself. After checking his watch, Lee Kixuan glanced at them and asked, "What are you all doing? Do you need me to invite you inside personally?" The moment he said this, the teachers quickly led the children into the building. This building was a small grocery store, and there were still some supplies on the shelves. Lee Kixuan walked to the back room and checked the second floor. When he saw the supplies stored there, he waved his hand and stored everything into one of his storage rings. When he was done, he went to check the windows and doors. Seeing that everything was well sealed, he returned to the first floor and locked the windows and doors. Seeing that everyone was standing there, he said, "Do whatever you want, just don't bother me." "Okay," one of the teachers replied with a nod. Lee Kixuan walked to the counter and sat in the chair. After he closed his eyes, everyone let out a sigh of relief. Since the children had only eaten one meal in the morning, the teachers gathered some food and water from the shelves and divided them. After they filled their stomachs, everyone huddled together and took a nap. While they had been able to sleep on the bus, their nerves were tense and no one had been able to rest. Now that they had finally found a safe place, they finally felt the fatigue and soon fell asleep. Meanwhile, at Linen City's base, the children had just finished their training and were walking back to the team's residence. When they arrived, they saw that Zun Qi, Wei Wying, and Wen Hanley were also present. Seeing them, the children nodded and greeted them. "Captain Zun, Captain Wei, Vice Captain Wen," the children said in unison. They had just started their training, and so far, they had only been running and doing physical exercises to strengthen their bodies. But the training was already showing results as they were no longer as timid and weak as before. Zun Qi waved at them and asked, "How's the training?" "It's bearable," Fu Lijian replied. Hearing this, Zun Qi nodded and said, "That's good. You all must be tired, go have a rest first." The children understood that the adults had something important to discuss, so they didn't stay for long and went to shower before returning to their rooms to rest. After the children left, Gu Sheos said, "Captain Zun, you came to visit us today. Is there something you need from me or my team?" Zun Qi nodded and replied, "There is indeed something I need from you and your girlfriend." Hearing this, Gu Sheos raised his eyebrows and said, "Captain Zun, feel free to speak your mind. I received a report that you and your girlfriend found grains after returning from Yunshan City. I want to ask if it's possible for you to share the information about the situation in Yunshan and where you found the grains." Gu Sheos looked at him for a moment before replying, "Captain Zun, even if we did find the grains, we have to inform our captain first and let him make the decision. I already contacted your captain, and he told me to discuss the matter directly with you," Sun Qi said. Hearing this, Gu Shao's lowered his eyes in thought before saying, Captain Zun, it's not impossible for me to share the information, but what benefit could you give me? You don't expect me to hand over the information for free, do you? Sun Qi smiled and said, Comrade Gu, you can tell me your conditions. Gu Shao's tapped his fingers on the armrest as he thought. After a while he said, Captain Zun, as a member of the base, it's only natural for me to contribute, so I won't demand too much. Raising 5 fingers, he added, I will sell this information to you for this much. Seeing the gesture, Wei Wang said, Comrade Gu, you are really generous. For such important information, you are only asking for 500 crystal cores. The moment he heard this, Gu Shao's chuckled and shook his head as he said, Captain Wei, as you said, this is important information. I'm sure Captain Zun wouldn't be so stingy as to only pay 500 crystal cores for it. Hearing this, Sun Qi smiled and asked, Comrade Gu, are you asking for 5,000 crystals? Snapping his fingers, Gu Shao said with a smile, it's indeed easy to talk to smart people. Wei Wang took a sharp breath at the price. His team often went out to clear zombies and expand the base's territory, so he knew how hard it was to obtain crystal cores. He never expected Gu Shao's to have such a big appetite. Once he opened his mouth, he asked for 5,000. While they were still thinking, Gu Shao sipped his tea and waited for his answer calmly. He was sure that Sun Qi would agree to pay. After all, what the base needed most right now was supplies. If they couldn't find more, they wouldn't be able to complete the wall construction or pay salaries. That would eventually lead to riots, and as he expected, Sun Qi agreed not long after. Comrade Gu, I will have my men deliver the crystals, but can you tell me how much grain you found first? He asked. Gu Shao nodded and replied, 5 kilometers from Yunshan City's border, there are 12 large granary locations. Each location has around 50 to 80 granaries. As for the amount of grain stored, I can't give you an exact number, but we checked the situation, and most of the granaries are nearly full. Hearing this, Sun Qi and Wen Hanli were delighted, while Wei Wang was stunned. If what Gu Shao said was true, then the price for this information was not expensive at all. If the Phantom team had claimed the grain themselves, they could easily sell the supplies and earn far more than 5,000 crystal cores. Comrade Gu, can you draw the granary's location for me? Sun Qi asked. Captain Zun, since you are buying this information from me, I will personally show you the way, Gu Shao replied. As soon as he heard this, Sun Qi slapped his thigh and said, Wonderful. Realizing he was losing his composure, Sun Qi coughed to cover his embarrassment before asking, Comrade Gu, when will you be able to leave? Once the payment arrives, we can depart at any time, Gu Shao said. Okay, I will have my team prepare the crystals and send over the payment as soon as possible, Sun Qi replied, rising to his feet. Gu Shao nodded and said, then I will wait for it. Since there were many things to prepare, Sun Qi left with Wei Wang and Wen Hanli after they finished the discussion. After they left, Rong Mo asked, Shaos, why did you agree to their request? More, since our team decided to stay in this base, this will be our home going forward. We have a responsibility to protect it. Since we can't help manage the base directly, we can at least support them in our own way, Gu Shaos replied. Brother Gu, if you wanted to help them, why did you ask for so many crystal cores? Rong Kinyu asked. Cousin, if you get something too easily, you won't appreciate it. If we help them for free, our assistance will be taken for granted. To avoid future complications, it's best to maintain a simple business relationship with them, Gu Shao said with a smile. Hearing this, the Rong siblings exchanged glances. Neither of them was good with business, so they didn't fully understand his reasoning, but they trust that he knew what he was doing. After they left the Phantom team's residence, Sun Qi didn't return to his house but went to the office instead. He held an emergency meeting with his team, while Wen Hanli went to the storage room to retrieve the crystal cores. The members of Sun Qi's team were few in number, but each of them had extensive battle experience and had followed him for years. When it came to handling important matters, he felt more at ease in trusting them with the responsibility. During the meeting, Sun Qi looked at them and said, From now on, each of you will lead a team consisting of 20 to 50 people. You can choose your own team members. After you decide on your team members, report their names to Wen Hanli, and we will register them as guards. From today onwards, each of you will take on B-grade missions with your team and report directly to Wen Hanli. Hearing this, one of his members asked, "Captain, are you disbanding our team?" Sun Qi shook his head and explained, "Since we have taken over command of this base, there are a lot of things we need to handle. Right now, I only trust all of you, but with limited manpower and too many critical matters to manage, we need to divide responsibilities. Although we won't be doing missions together as a single team anymore, we now have more important roles. I need you all to help me train new personnel. As our base expands, the number of guards required to secure the perimeter will also increase. So we are not disbanding the team, we are expanding it." Upon hearing his explanation, they exchanged glances. They understood that they now carried even greater responsibilities than before. Training new guards might sound simple, but it was far more complicated in practice. They would not only have to investigate the backgrounds and personalities of the new recruits, but also monitor them in case any were spies. On top of that, they had to entrust them with missions and train them personally. Training them would inevitably expose their core strengths, and if even one person with ill intentions infiltrated the team, it could put the entire base in danger. Realizing the weight of their new roles, they no longer questioned their captain's decision and said, "Captain, we will do our best." Sun Qi nodded and added, "Besides that, I have another important announcement. The Phantom team found several granaries near the border of Yunshan City. I want all of you to take some people and retrieve the supplies." "Captain, transporting the supplies will take a long time. Should we station some people there to guard the granaries during the transport?" one of them asked. Hearing this, Sun Qi thought for a moment and said, "Then pick 100 guards to station there." Understood. Since the matter of the supplies was confidential, they couldn't involve the newly hired guards. So, the 100 guards would be chosen from the soldiers who had previously followed the colonels. By the time the meeting ended, it was already past midnight. Sun Qi didn't bother returning home and took a nap in his office. As for Wen Hanley, he had already delivered the crystal cores to Gu Shao's and was making preparations for the mission. Early the next morning, the guards woke up before dawn. After completing their preparations, they headed to the cafeteria for breakfast. The chefs had already been informed by Wen Hanley the previous night, and today, they woke up early to prepare the morning meal. Thanks to the supplies provided by the Phantom team and those brought back by the soldiers, the food quality in the base had improved. For breakfast, the chefs prepared steamed buns, millet porridge, and omelettes. These dishes were specifically prepared for the guards. If the survivors wanted to eat them, they had to pay with their points. Although the price was quite high, many people were still willing to spend extra points to have egg or meat dishes. As a result, despite the large quantity of food prepared every day, the meals in the cafeteria were always sold out. While the soldiers were eating, Gu Shao's, Rong Mo, and Rong Kinyu were also having their breakfast. Today, the Rong siblings would join the soldiers in a mission to clear out zombies and expand the base's territory, while Gu Shao's would accompany Sun Qi's team to the granaries. As for the children, they were still asleep and would go to the training field later. After breakfast, Gu Shao's prepared several bottles of water and a bag of crystal cores for the Rong siblings. He held his girlfriend's hand and said, "Mo, be careful when you go out. Remember, no matter what the situation is, your safety comes first." "I understand," Rong Mo nodded. After a brief pause, she added, "You have to be careful too." "Okay." After exchanging a few more words, they left the house together but went in opposite directions. The Rong siblings reported to the base's mission hall, while Gu Shao's headed to the base's gate to meet up with Sun Qi's team. When he arrived at the base entrance, the sun had already risen on the eastern horizon. As he walked out of the base, he was surprised to see Sun Qi present. Judging from his uniform, it seemed that he planned to join them on this mission. Noticing him walking over, Sun Qi smiled and said, "Good morning, Comrade Gu." Gu Shao's looked around for a moment before he asked, "Captain Sun, are you coming with us?" Sun Qi nodded and said, "I will go there to check the situation and return with the first team." Hearing his words and seeing the number of soldiers, Gu Shao's had a guess in his mind but said nothing. After they finished the final preparations, Sun Qi said, "Everyone, it's time to depart." The soldiers boarded the trucks and cars at his order. The trucks would be used to transport grains, while the cars were used to accommodate the soldiers and space-type ability users. After several rounds of recruitment, they managed to recruit a total of 17 space-type ability users. 12 were from the military, and 5 were commoners who had recently awakened their abilities. With soldiers keeping an eye on them, they wouldn't be able to escape with the supplies or take part of them, as each load would be weighed and listed before being given to them. While this put a lot of pressure on the ability users and strained the relationship between the base and the space-type users due to a lack of trust, they couldn't completely trust those who came from among the commoners. As for the ability users from the military, they were fully trusted and did not face such restrictions. After the team boarded the vehicles, they departed from the base, standing atop the wall when Hanley watched them leave until they disappeared from view before returning to the office. Without the captain, all responsibilities fell on his shoulders. It seemed he would have to work overtime for several days again. At the same time in the mission hall, Rongmore and Rong Kinyu stood to the side and waited with other ability users. When the others saw them, they sized them up closely. Although everyone would go with soldiers sent by the base to expand its territory, the crystal cores they obtained during the mission were theirs to keep. Therefore, some conflicts and clashes during the mission were unavoidable. Most of the ability users had bulging muscles in certain parts of their bodies, while others had mutations such as altered eyes, noses, or ears. Just by looking at these changes, it was easy for others to guess what their abilities were. As for those with unaltered bodies, it was clear they were elemental type or special type ability users. Compared to the deformed, those who looked normal were usually more dangerous and powerful. So when they realized the Rong siblings had no visible deformities, everyone made a mental note not to offend them. They waited for half an hour before a group of soldiers approached. Seeing the number of ability users, the man leading the group nodded and said, "Good morning, everyone. I'm Wang He, and you can call me Sergeant Wang." After checking his watch, Wang He continued, "Today, we will be heading to the western area. We must clear an area of 500-meter radius from the fourth wall before dark. Let's depart now." Unlike the soldiers, the ability users lacked vigor and discipline. When Wang He finished speaking, they simply nodded and followed the soldiers without even bothering to reply. To them, this was strictly business cooperation. As they exited the central hall, everyone boarded military trucks and set off. It took them 20 minutes of driving before they left the base through the west gate. Inside the truck, Rongmore pulled her baseball hat lower to block the wind. With no rain for many days, the road was dusty, and the soil cracked from the lack of moisture. Sitting on her left side was her cousin, and on her right side was a young girl who kept stealing glances at her cousin while blushing. After a while, the girl finally tugged on her sleeve and called out, "Sister." Turning to her, Rongmore asked, "Do you need anything from me?" "Sister, that person beside you, is he your boyfriend?" the girl asked shyly. Rongmore recalled her boyfriend's words and replied, "What's it got to do with you?" The girl was startled by her cold tone and assumed they were indeed a couple. Feeling disappointed, she lowered her head and murmured, "Sister, don't be angry. I didn't mean anything. I only asked because I admire that brother." She didn't finish her sentence, which only made it sound more ambiguous. The moment Rongmore heard her tone and saw her behavior, she instantly thought of Linen University's flower, Mo Bingsu. Both of them gave off the same vibes, a thick scent of green tea. Since they sat close together, the people nearby heard her words clearly. In the entire group there were only 3 women, including Rongmore. Because of this, the men paid more attention to them. After all, the current male-to-female ratio was around 50-1. Before Rongmore could respond, a man sitting across from them suddenly said, "Comrade, it's not right for you to bully this sister. She only asked a question. Is there a need to be so aggressive?" The moment Rongmore heard his words, she let out a chuckle and asked, "What did I do to her that made me a bully?" The man was stunned by her question. Thinking it over, he realized Rongmore's reaction was perfectly normal. After all, being questioned by another woman about her boyfriend, it was only right to be guarded, especially toward a stranger. Reaching this conclusion, the man's gaze shifted to the girl and he thought, "Indeed, I shouldn't trust a woman who looks delicate. It's impossible for someone delicate to be able to survive in the current situation." When the young girl noticed the shift in everyone's gaze toward her, she lowered her head and bit her lip. She knew Rongmore and the man who came with her this morning weren't a couple because she had seen Rongmore hugging Gu Sheo's before. They didn't know her, but she knew them. After all, they had attended the same university, though in different departments. She had escaped from Linen University before the first rain and stayed in a survivor camp near the border until she was relocated to this base. When she saw Gu Sheo's again, she was so happy as she was finally able to meet the person she liked. She had wanted to greet him and confess her feelings, but before she could, she saw him hugging another woman and smiling at her gently. She admitted she wasn't as pretty as Rongmore, but she had awakened her ability and could help him. Compared to Rongmore, she didn't think she was lacking. That was why she believed that if she could just remove Rongmore from Gu Sheo's life, she could take her place as his girlfriend. Now that she finally had the chance to go on a mission together with Rongmore, she wanted to get close and lower her guard. No one could predict what might happen during a mission. If Rongmore were to be accidentally injured by zombies, no one would trace it back to her. Unexpectedly, even without Gu Sheo's around, another man had taken interest in Rongmore. Why are all the good things always taken by her? Why do all the men like Rongmore more than me? She thought with hatred. She was unwilling to accept that Gu Sheo's liked her. She was unwilling to lose to her. Unaware of what the girl beside her was thinking, Rongmore subtly moved closer to her cousin to create distance. For some reason, she felt uneasy around the girl and sensed bad intentions from her. After that brief episode, the rest of the trip continued in silence. Half an hour later, they finally arrived at the edge of the base's safe zone. Wang He got off the truck and said, "Everyone, get down, we will start from this area." At his command, everyone disembarked and looked around. Unlike the area near the base, this place looked bleak and desolate. The roads were blocked by abandoned cars, some cracked and pitted. The buildings were covered in dust and sand, signs that no one had lived here for a long time. Wang He turned to the ability users and instructed, "Power-type ability users, you will be responsible for moving the cars blocking the road. Metal-type users, you will turn those cars into metal blocks. Space-type users, your job is to collect the metal blocks. As for the rest of you, divide into smaller teams of 2 to 5 people and begin clearing out zombies in the area." As he spoke, soldiers began placing barricades along the road. As the area was cleared, they would move the barricades forward. This was how the safe zone would be expanded. Looking at the group, Wang He asked, "Any questions?" Seeing none, he nodded and added, "All right, divide into groups and move out." Rongmore and Rong Kinyu had already planned to work as a team and didn't intend to let anyone else join them. So when the young girl tried to approach, they exchanged a glance and walked off in the opposite direction. While most of the soldiers and ability users were clearing the area near the road, the two of them headed toward the roadside buildings. Although they didn't have space-type abilities like Zyro Kai or Feng Yun, they still wanted to look for anything useful, so they decided to check the pharmacy. The two of them drew their blades as Rong Kinyu pushed open the door. The moment they stepped inside, a zombie's roar echoed from the side. "Zra!" Rong Kinyu instinctively raised his left hand, instantly forming a metal shield. Clang crit! The sharp screech of claws scraping against metal rang through the room. Duog crash! Using his shield, Rong Kinyu shoved the zombie back. As it stumbled, he kicked it in the chest, sending it flying into a shelf, which collapsed with a loud crash. Crack! Before the zombie could get back on its feet, Rongmore had already appeared in front of it. With one swift movement, she swung her blade, severing its head. The head rolled to the ground while black blood splattered across the wall. After killing the zombie, she split its skull open with her blade and checked for a crystal. A moment later, she stood up and shook her head. There is no crystal core. Rong Kinyu lowered his hand, and the metal shield turned into a bracelet on his left wrist. Since he didn't have a creation-type ability like Wen Kai, he had to carry his own metal. To make his ability more efficient, he had turned the metal he had collected into a bracelet he wore daily. He looked at the blade in his hand, hesitated for a moment, then transformed it into another bracelet and wore it on his right wrist. He wasn't experienced with using blades and was much more comfortable with metal needles. Rather than carrying a weapon that didn't suit him, it was better to prepare one that did. After they killed the zombie, Rongmore and Rong Kinyu didn't take the medicine but went to check the rest of the building first. The pharmacy was located in a 3-story building, with the ground floor used as a pharmacy, while the second and third floors were used as a warehouse. The two of them climbed the stairs and went to the second floor. As they walked, they heard a faint sound coming from the corner of the warehouse. "Stay behind me," Rong Kinyu whispered in a hushed voice. Rongmore nodded and followed after her cousin. As the two of them walked closer to the corner, they heard the muffled sound of a baby's cry. They exchanged glances and decided not to approach that corner. Instead, they stood several meters away and said, "Come out." They waited for a while before they saw a young girl hugging a baby, walking out from behind the boxes. The girl was thin and unkempt. From her clothes and hair, it was clear that she hadn't taken a shower for a long time. The baby in her arms was sucking on the girl's finger while sobbing softly. Noticing the rusty scent in the air, Rongmore's eyes flashed with surprise. She observed the girl and noticed that she was not only thin but also pale. Her eyes looked empty, as if she couldn't see anything. "Who are you?" the girl asked. "We are mercenaries hired by the Linen Base. We came here to clear out the zombies," Rongmore replied. The girl paused for a moment after hearing her words and asked again, "Can you help me bring my brother back to the base?" Hearing this, Rongmore asked her back, "Why don't you bring him back by yourself?" The girl shook her head and said with a helpless smile, "I won't be able to live for long. Only you and your cousin can save my brother's life." The moment they heard this, both Rongmore and Rongkinyu were surprised. The two of them didn't look similar despite sharing the same blood. Therefore, most people would often think they were a couple, but this girl knew they were cousins in just a few minutes of meeting. What's more, her eyes didn't seem to be able to see, so how could she know, who is she? After she said this, the girl raised her hands and handed the baby to them. The Rong siblings exchanged glances but didn't reach out. The girl let out a sigh and placed the baby on top of one of the boxes and said, "I'm grateful that my lifespan will end before the hellish era arrives, but I mourn for the future of humanity, as they would only have one chance to survive." When she finished her words, the girl's face suddenly cracked. Her empty eyes turned to them as she said softly, "Arun." Crash! The next moment, her stomach was ripped apart and something came out of it. Seeing the tentacle-like thing moving toward them at a fast speed, Rongkinyu said, "Be careful." Clang duog. The force of the attack was too strong for him to block, and he was sent flying, colliding with the wall. Cough! Rongkinyu coughed out a mouthful of blood as he slid down the wall. Raising his gaze, he saw the tentacle-like thing move toward him again. He pushed himself up and ducked to the side, but the speed of the tentacle was too fast. "Brother!" Boom! Seeing that her cousin was in danger, Rongmore raised her hand and sent a fireball toward the tentacle. As the fireball collided with the tentacle, it burned from the fire and retracted back. Rongmore glanced at the baby on top of the box and reached out to him. As she hugged the baby, she ran to the stairs and said, "Brother, we have to leave." Rongkinyu nodded and followed after her. Behind them, the girl's body was devoured by the mutant zombie and was no longer to be seen. Zroar! Boom! When they reached the ground floor, they heard the roar of the zombie coming from the second floor, followed by the sound of an explosion. Both of them rushed out of the building and were shocked to see the mutant zombie standing on the rooftop. Judging by the situation, the sound of the explosion might be due to the zombie destroying the roof. Run! Before he even finished his words, the mutant zombie had already noticed them and raised its hand. The next moment, its hand turned into something similar to a tentacle and flew toward them. Boom! Crack! The two of them managed to dodge the attack, but they were thrown away by the boulder flying toward them. Fortunately, Rongkinyu used his metal shield to block the boulder. Otherwise, the two of them might have turned into flatbread by now. The sound of the fighting was loud and attracted more zombies to the area. Hearing the roaring of zombies coming from the distance, the two of them exchanged glances and noticed the panic in each other's eyes. Not far from them, Wang He, the soldiers, and the rest of the ability users heard the sound of the battle. When they heard the sound, the soldiers quickly sent two teams to provide support and check on the situation. As for the ability users, some of them followed the soldiers with anticipation and excitement. After fighting the zombies several times, most of them already knew that only a high-level zombie could make such a commotion. They went over not to provide help, but to find a chance to snatch the crystal core. A high-level crystal core was important for them, whether being used to increase their ability power or to exchange for supplies. Everyone went with their own ulterior motives, including the young girl. When they arrived at the location, they were stunned to see Rongkinyu being strangled by the mutant zombie, while Rongmore was coughing blood as she lay on the ground, full of injuries. Seeing the dire situation, one of the soldiers said, "Everyone shoot." Hearing this, the soldiers quickly aimed their rifles at the mutant zombie and opened fire. Bangs, bangs, bang. At this moment, Rongkinyu's neck was being held by the zombie. He was almost out of breath, but he still retained his consciousness. When he heard the soldier's words, he focused his energy on his right wrist. The moment the first bullet was shot, a metal barrier enveloped his body like a layer of skin. At the same time, the zombie's arm was shot, and it let go of its grip. Free from being strangled, Rongkinyu fell to the ground with a loud thud. He held his neck and coughed while gasping for air. Bangs, bangs, bang. Under the rain of bullets, the zombie leaped back and dodged the bullets. Raising its head, it let out a roar. Zroar! Ron Kinyu stood up after he caught his breath and said hoarsely, "It's bad. That zombie is summoning more zombies." Hearing this, the soldiers turned to him, and one of them said, "Everyone, retreat." The ability users had never met a high-level zombie and were already scared out of their wits. The moment they heard the soldiers' words, they turned around and ran without hesitation. Bangs, bangs, bang. The soldiers continued shooting at the zombies, trying to delay them so they had time to retreat. At the same time, Ron Kinyu rushed to his cousin. He quickly carried his cousin on his back and picked up the baby. While he ran, he lowered his eyes and met the baby's calm gaze. For a moment, he felt a chill run down his spine. Logically speaking, a baby would cry in this kind of situation, but this baby didn't even let out a hiccup, let alone a cry, even after he was attacked by the zombie at close range. The moment this thought flashed in his mind, Ron Kinyu rushed toward an alley and looked around. When he saw a store with a back door open, he rushed over. With the high-level zombie summoning all the surrounding zombies, he wasn't worried that he would be ambushed by them. After entering the room, he found a safe place and put the baby down. As if knowing that he was being abandoned, the baby reached out and held onto his sleeve tightly. Ron Kinyu was taken aback by this and was sure that he shouldn't bring the baby back to the base when he met the baby's gaze. As he pried open the baby's hand, he suddenly heard a cry echo in his mind. Wow! Startled by this, Ron Kinyu's face turned pale and he looked at the baby in shock. He licked his lips and asked, Is it you who talked inside my head?" The baby pouted his lips and looked at him with teary eyes as the baby's voice echoed in Ron Kinyu's mind again, "Don't go." This time, he was sure that it was the baby who talked to him. From his body size, this baby should be around 3 months old, so it was illogical for him to be able to understand his words and talk to him like this. This baby was too extraordinary to be left behind like this. He hesitated for a moment before he gritted his teeth and picked up the baby. As he carried the baby and his cousin, he took the small road and returned to the team. At the same time, the zombie had already reached the location where they parked their vehicles. With more people on their side, the ability users and the soldiers were not as panicked as before. Seeing the zombies 50 meters away from them, Wang He said, "Aim at their heads, shoot." Bangs, bangs, bang. Following his order, the soldiers aimed their rifles at the group of zombies in front of them. It took them several shots to kill a zombie. Seeing this, Wang He turned to the ability users and said, "What are you all doing? Kill the zombies." Hearing his words, the ability users finally regained their senses, but none dared to go to the front line to face a large group of zombies. Seeing this, Ron Kinyu handed the baby and his cousin to a soldier nearby and said, "Help me take care of them." Before the soldier could reply, he had already rushed to the front and waved his hands. The next moment, the bracelets on his wrists flew toward the zombies as they changed into metal needles midair. Stab, stab, stab. The metal needles pierced the zombies' foreheads and killed them instantly. Waving his hands, the metal needles flew out of the rotten skulls and toward the nearby zombies. With him killing the zombies, the burden on the soldiers was lessened. Wang He glanced at him and noted the ability users who joined the fight and those who were too scared to fight. When they returned to the base, he would list their names and blacklist them. The base wouldn't hire them anymore. While they were able to handle the low-level zombies, they knew that no one was able to handle the high-level zombie. Even so, they could only try to kill the zombie using their rifles and bullets. Not far from them, several groups of people were watching the fight. After a while, one of them turned to their team leader and asked, "Boss, should we help them out?" Boss Lin thought for a moment and said, "The number of zombies is too much. If we don't help, they will reach the base soon. Let's go." After he said this, he rushed out of the building and ran directly toward the group of zombies. When everyone saw a group of people suddenly run toward the zombies, they were taken aback. "Be careful," Wang He shouted. He thought that no matter how low their chance of survival, he shouldn't let the commoners sacrifice themselves like this. But before he could do anything to save them, he was stunned by what he saw. Boom, crack. Boss Lin leaped and aimed his punch at the nearest zombie. As his fist smashed a zombie's head into pulp, the ground cracked due to the impact. Zroar! The zombies let out excited roars as fresh food was delivered directly to their faces. Reaching out their claws, the zombies aimed at Boss Lin's head. Seeing this, he lowered his body and sent a punch to the zombie's jaw. Crack! Due to the force of his punch, the zombie's neck was broken, and a rotten head flew several meters away. Boss, let us have some fun too. The members of Boss Lin's team also joined the fight with their blades. As they swung their weapons, the zombies' heads were hacked and chopped. Seeing this, a man standing on top of a building turned to a woman beside him and asked, "Sister, should we take care of that high-level zombie?" Hearing his words, Lin Fei said, "Jian Zikin, that zombie is at least at level 3 or 4. You only broke through to level 1 yesterday. Do you think you are strong enough to take that zombie down?" Jian Zikin glanced at him and replied, "I can't do it, but my sister can." Jian Huan thought for a moment before she said, "I will give it a try. If I fail, we should retreat. No matter what, our safety is the priority." "Okay," Jian Zikin and Lin Fei nodded. Compared to her brother, Jian Huan had only awakened her ability recently, so she had no confidence that she would be able to kill the high-level zombie. After all, her ability had lots of restrictions and consumed lots of energy whenever she used it. The three of them leapt to other buildings so they could get closer to the high-level zombie. While they were moving silently, the zombie was using its tentacle-like arm to grab the ability users. Ack, the ability user let out a horrified scream when his head was grabbed by the zombie's tentacle. "Save me." Before he could finish his words, his head was pulled off, and his body fell to the ground with a thud. Warm blood splashed from his neck, and soon his body was torn apart by the surrounding zombies. Standing in the distance, the high-level zombie ate the head in relish. Seeing this situation, the soldiers and the ability users felt a chill run down their spines. Their faces turned pale, and some with weak stomachs vomited on the spot. While the high-level zombie was enjoying its meal, Jian Huan and her team had already reached the building 20 meters away from it. "Sister, can you do it from here?" Jian Zikin asked in a low voice. Jian Huan nodded and said, "I will give it a try." After she said this, she raised her hand and focused her energy on her palms. The next moment, a transparent, bubble-like energy floated from her palms toward the high-level zombie at a fast speed. Feeling a sudden danger coming at it, the zombie turned its body and raised its arms to block the attack. But unlike usual, it didn't see any attack at all. Feeling confused, it looked around to check the situation. At the same time, Jian Huan said, "It's done." The next moment, a transparent, bubble-like barrier wrapped around the high-level zombie's body and began getting smaller and smaller. Feeling something pressing on its body, the zombie opened its mouth and let out a roar as it moved its arms, trying to free itself from the barrier. Zroar! As the zombie hit the barrier, Jian Huan's forehead was covered in cold sweat. She continued controlling the barrier and made it smaller and smaller. Due to the zombie's resistance, she needed a lot of energy to continue shrinking the barrier's size. Roar! The zombie let out another roar with a hint of panic. Since the barrier was transparent, no one knew what was going on. They only saw the high-level zombie thrashing and roaring wildly. "Sergeant, what should we do?" one of the soldiers asked. "Continue killing the low-level zombies. We don't have the capability to kill the high-level zombie. I have contacted the base, and right now, we can only hold them back as long as possible as we wait for reinforcement," Wang He said. Understood. Under everyone's gazes, the high-level zombie's body was slowly being pressed into a ball. Crack, crack, crash. The sounds of bones breaking and flesh being squeezed could be heard amidst the zombies' roaring. On top of the building, Jian Huan's face had already turned pale, and she could taste iron in her throat. When she thought that she wouldn't be able to kill the zombie, she saw the zombie being crushed in the distance. The moment he saw this, Jian Zikin exclaimed, "Sister, you did it." The corners of Jian Huan's lips lifted when she saw that the zombie had been killed by her. For a level 0 space-type ability user to kill a high-level zombie was unheard of. From this alone, it could be seen how strong her ability was. Even though her space-type ability couldn't be used to store items like others, she could control space and use it in battle. The downside was the high energy and mental strength consumption, which made it very risky during battle. But if used like this, her ability was a powerful skill. Using the last energy she had, Jian Huan pulled back the transparent barrier and picked up the crystal core. The next moment, she closed her eyes and lost consciousness. Jian Zikin reached out to hug her while exclaiming, "Sister." Lin Fei looked at the battle below and said, "Without the high-level zombie, there won't be a problem. Let's go back first." "Okay," Giant Zikin nodded and carried his sister on his back. While the three of them left the battle area and returned to base, the soldiers and ability users were stunned. They didn't know the reason why the zombie had suddenly turned into a ball and exploded. "Sergeant, this." Wang He looked at the surrounding buildings and said, "Someone must have killed the zombie using a special type ability." The soldiers exchanged glances in confusion. If someone was able to kill the high-level zombie so easily, why hadn't they gotten any information about such a strong person? Half an hour later, the reinforcement team finally arrived. With the addition of soldiers with abilities helping them, they managed to clear the zombies after 4 hours. With just a glance, everyone knew that the number of casualties was not low at all. At noon, the soldiers were cleaning up the zombies' corpses, while Rong Kinyu brought his cousin back to the base. As for the baby, he was handed to the soldiers and would later be handled by the base. Inside the infirmary, Rong Mo lay on one of the beds with a pale face. Sitting on the chair beside the bed, Rong Kinyu stared at the wound on his cousin's upper arm. The wound was caused by the high-level zombie and had started to show signs of mutation. According to the doctor, the chance of her turning into a zombie was as high as 70%. They had already cut off the rotten flesh and treated the wound, but it didn't stop the mutation. He thought for a long time and took out a piece of transparent crystal core from his pocket. This was a level 3 crystal core that he had obtained during his escape. He was planning to save it for himself and use it during an emergency, but with his cousin's condition getting worse by the minute, it seemed that he could only take the gamble. Recalling the scene he had seen before, he stood up and went to the bathroom. Inside, he cleaned the crystal core with clean water and took several deep breaths to calm down. "This is the only way. Kinyu, you can't hesitate now," he talked to himself. After a moment, he returned to the ward and looked around. Besides them, the rest of the beds were full, and there were lots of people in the ward. But most of them were sleeping or doing their own things. Using his body to block their gazes, he put the crystal core into his cousin's mouth. The moment the crystal core entered Rong Mo's mouth, she swallowed it instinctively. As the crystal core went down her throat, it melted and turned into energy. Seeing that she swallowed the crystal, Rong Kinyu clenched his fists and sat down. Right now, he could only wait and hope that his cousin would be able to survive. Meanwhile, Gu Shao's and Zun Qi's team finally arrived at the border. Sitting in the back seat, he said, "Captain Zun, the nearest granary is located 5 kilometers in the right direction." Hearing this, Zun Qi nodded and informed the soldiers following them via a communication device. Half an hour later, they finally arrived at the granary area. After parking their cars, they got out and gathered together. Zun Qi checked the area and took out a map of Yunshan City and Linen City. 5 minutes later, he turned to Gu Shao's and asked, "Comrade Gu, do you know the situation inside the granary?" Gu Shao's nodded and replied, "The last time I came here with my team, there were several scattered zombies around the granaries, but the dormitory area is full of zombies, so we didn't go inside to check the situation." Zun Qi frowned at his words and thought for a while before he said, "We won't bother with the zombies in the dormitory area. Our mission is to get the supplies. After we transport everything, we will make a plan and deal with the zombies." When the soldiers heard this, they nodded and said, "Understood." After leaving a group of soldiers to guard their cars and the entrance, Zun Qi went into the granary area with his soldiers, following Gu Shao's lead. With the soldiers taking care of the zombies, he walked leisurely and reached the granary in less than 40 minutes. The moment they saw the size of the granaries, everyone was stunned. With the current number of base members, one granary could last them for 6 to 8 months. "Open the gate," Zun Qi said. With his order, the metal-type ability user used his energy to unlock the massive padlock. Afterward, the soldiers pushed open the door and entered the granary. Inside the granary, stacks of sacks were piled up neatly until they almost reached the ceiling. Except for a 1-meter-wide road between the piles, the rest of the area was filled with sacks. Zun Qi pulled out his dagger and made a small cut on the sacks. When he pulled out his dagger, some plump rice fell to the ground. He squatted down, picked up the rice, and said with a smile, "This is good quality rice." After standing up, he added, "Everyone, transport everything in this granary to the base." "Understood," the soldiers replied in unison. Standing on the side, Gu Shao said, "Captain Zun, I will mark the location of the granary on the map and return to the base with you." Since they had checked that there was no problem with the information, Zun Qi had no objection and said, "Okay." While they were busy loading the grains onto the trucks, the colonels, sergeants, and soldiers who were escaping from Linen City border camp were currently running for their lives. After the Phantom team cleared out the zombie horde, they didn't return to the small hotel and escort the higher-ups, but returned to Linen City directly. The higher-ups and their soldiers waited for them for days before they realized that the zombies had been cleaned up. When they left the small hotel, most of their supplies had been eaten, and they had to find more on the way to the capital. At first, they were doing well as the surrounding zombies had been killed, and they only encountered some scattered ones. With lots of people on their side, the soldiers were able to kill the zombies with ease. Due to this, their confidence increased, and they lowered their guard. They thought that the situation was not as bad as they had expected, and no longer took it seriously, until they left the border area and entered Wanling City and faced the real situation of the apocalypse. Wanling City is located to the west of Pingjiang City and has a smaller population, but due to the area's well-developed tourism, the number of zombies was as high as in Linen City. At this moment, the group was only entering one of the counties when they saw the road was filled with zombies. Sitting inside the cars, their hairs stood on end when they saw the zombies killing each other and devouring brains as if it were a delicacy. As the cars moved, the sound of the engines attracted the attention of the nearby zombies. Noticing that there were fresh delicacies, the zombies rushed toward their direction while baring their sharp claws and teeth. Roar! The sound of the zombies' roars was so deafening that they felt pain in their ears. "See, Colonel, what should we do now?" one of the soldiers asked with a pale face. Coming back to his senses, the colonel shouted, "What are you waiting for? Get out of this place." With his words, the soldier quickly changed the gear into reverse and stepped on the pedal. With a roar of the engine, their car jolted and moved back at a fast speed, crashing into the zombies blocking their path. Crash duog crack. If it was on an empty road, he might have been able to pull off this move and escape, but with so many zombies surrounding them, the car lacked momentum, and after crashing into several zombies, it got stuck in the middle of the zombie crowd. Bang bang crit. The car was surrounded tightly by the zombies, as the sound of them banging on the doors and windows echoed in the area, followed by the sharp sound of their claws scratching the glass and metal. Inside the car, the soldiers were anxious and panicked. With how the zombies attacked the car, it would only be able to hold on for at most half an hour. After that, they would become the zombies' food. With this in mind, the soldiers regretted not following Wei Wang instead, but now that they were in this situation, it was useless to feel regret. Bangs bangs bang. Zra. As the group was trapped in their cars, a pair of men stood on the top of a building 30 meters away from them. One of them was eating a sausage, while the other clicked his tongue and asked, "Yue, should we go help them?" The man eating the sausage only gave him a glance and continued eating while staring at the horizon in a daze, not even bothering to reply to his question. Cheng Rui clicked his tongue when he saw how boring his brother was. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Since you don't want to go, just wait here. I will go have some fun." Hearing this, Cheng Yue nodded and replied, "Okay." Before he even finished his words, his brother had already leaped from the rooftop and landed on another building. He watched his agile brother jumping around like a grasshopper and took out another sausage from his backpack before he started eating his sausage. In a few minutes, Cheng Rui had already reached the building on the roadside where the soldiers were trapped. As he raised his hand, the chains connecting the rings on his fingers and the bracelets on his wrist made a clunking sound. The next moment, the rings, chains, and bracelets turned into several metal arrows and flew at one of the cars at high speed. Stab, 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 stab. As the arrows pierced the roof of the car, the people inside were shocked and thought that someone was coming to save them. But before they could let out a cheer, a huge thunderbolt fell from the sky and hit them directly. Crack, boom. The moment the thunderbolt hit the car, the metal arrows acted as a medium and sent the lightning toward the surrounding area like a huge fishnet, roasting the surrounding zombies and the people inside the car instantly. Boom! Due to the high temperature of the lightning, the car exploded in less than 10 seconds. The explosion and fire killed another group of zombies. Standing on top of the rooftop, the corner of Cheng Rui's lips lifted as he flicked his wrist and sent the arrows toward another car. Crack, boom. Using the same method, he killed more than half of the zombies in the area. As for the people inside the cars, he never bothered with their lives or deaths. He and his brother had nothing to do and had traveled to this area from the base to get some crystal cores. With how much his brother was eating every day, they needed lots of crystals to buy food and water. Since the road was blocked with lots of abandoned cars, he continued to clear the zombies with ease. Half an hour later, the large group of zombies gathering in the area had been reduced to ashes. Besides the destroyed road and several cars burning, there were only scattered crystal cores on the road. Cheng Rui checked the area for a while before he leaped from the rooftop and landed on the road. In the midst of the burning cars, he walked at a leisurely pace while picking up the crystal cores. It took him almost 2 hours to pick up a bag of crystal cores and return to find his brother taking a nap peacefully. Staring at the handsome face of his brother, he felt the urge to slap his brother's head. When he was working diligently, his brother was actually sleeping without any care. This contrast made him unhappy, and if he was unhappy, he was terrifying. Narrowing his eyes, he snapped his fingers and a thunderbolt flew toward the sleeping Cheng Yue. Crack, boom. Chapter 337, Harvesting Cabbages. Before the thunderbolt even hit the target, it was blocked by a shield made of sand. Seeing this, Cheng Rui let out a snort and said, "Wake up, Yue, it's time to leave." Slowly opening his eyes, Cheng Yue sat up and let out a yawn. He stretched his body for a moment before he slowly stood up and carried his backpack. Cheng Rui looked at his lazy demeanor and said, "Yue, can't you move faster? You are as slow as a sloth." Hearing this, Cheng Yue finally said, "Sloth is good." The moment he heard this, Cheng Rui's anger shot up, and he had to take a deep breath to calm down. Otherwise, he might have ended up killing his own twin brother. Meanwhile, the Phantom team finally arrived at Jen's Lake. The area was a tourist spot before, so the number of zombies was high. A large group of zombies followed them 20 meters behind their armored vehicles. Inside one of the cars, Chin Luzi checked the map in his mind. After a moment, he used his walkie-talkie and said, "Captain, there is a hotel 300 meters in front. Lead the way, we will stay the night there." Jin Zuyan's reply came from the communication device. Understood. 15 minutes later, they saw the tall building on the left side. Unlike other buildings that chose an ancient design, this building used the modern concept of a high-end hotel. They drove the armored vehicles into the hotel area. The number of zombies in the hotel area was at least 3,000 or more, so when they drove, they would crash into the zombies. Crash, crack. Another zombie was crushed by the car and was ground into a rotten paste under the car's heavy, huge tires. When they finally reached the hotel's main entrance, Chin Luzi said, "Captain, there are more than 5,000 zombies in this area." Sikai pushed the zombies back. "When Mo Wenkai, you two created the wall, we will clear the zombies first," Jin Zuyan said. Receiving the order, Li Sikai opened the door and came out. As he raised his hands, a lightning net appeared above his palm and expanded at a fast speed. In less than a minute, the zombies were pushed back, and a lightning barrier surrounded the armored vehicles. Zra! The zombies continued to lunge at the lightning net, despite being burned or pushed back by the force. When the area was cleared, the Phantom team members came out of the cars. The next moment, when Mo and Wenkai created a metal wall surrounding them. With the high metal wall blocking the zombies, Li Sikai removed the lightning net, and the members leaped to the top of the wall. Standing on top of the 5-meter-tall wall, they were finally able to see the situation clearly. Looking at the rotten heads bobbing up and down, added with the rotten arms reaching out to them from below, Zyro Kai said with a shiver, "Those people with trypophobia might faint when they see this." When Feng Yun heard his words, he almost rolled his eyes until it reached the atmosphere. This person is really talented, as he is still able to speak nonsense when facing so many zombies. "Captain, the number of zombies is more than 10,000 within a radius of 500 meters. There are more coming from other directions," Chin Luzi suddenly said. Mo Junji was taken aback when he heard his words. He had never experienced fighting against a zombie horde, so he had no knowledge about how strong the team was. He thought that they would panic. Unexpectedly, instead of panicking, everyone was excited. When he turned his head, he saw the members doing some warm-up exercises. Checking his watch, Jin Zuyan saw that they only had 3 hours before sunset and said, "There is no need to hold back and clear the zombies before sunset. It will be troublesome when the red moon rises." Understood, the members replied in unison. Since their captain already said so, they changed their minds and started using their abilities instead of their airguns. Boom! The first attack came from the combination attack between Shen Jinj and Gao Bohai. The blue fire tornado swept away a large group of zombies while burning the surrounding zombies. Boom, booms, boom. Unwilling to be outdone, Chin Luzi snapped his fingers, and a series of explosions were heard in the distance. Now, he was able to combine his wind-type ability and his psychic-type ability. Using his mental energy, he could control the location of the atom combinations according to the map in his mind. Soon after, Zhao Lijai pulled out her dagger and infused her energy into it. The next moment, the dagger turned into a giant ice scythe. Unlike the members, who attacked from afar, she leaped from the wall and jumped directly to the zombies below. Seeing this, everyone was surprised, but before they could let out a word, they saw her turn in midair and swing the giant scythe, as the long, thin blade gleamed under the sunlight. Boom! In a split second, a massive water blade in crescent shape flew out from the scythe toward the zombies below and turned them into mincemeat. Black blood and rotten flesh scattered everywhere as a deep, long crack appeared on the ground. Zhao Lijai flipped her body and landed lightly on the ground. Holding the scythe with 2 hands, she narrowed her eyes and swung it horizontally. Whoosh crash! In one smooth movement, she harvested several rotten heads. The members were stunned as they watched her chop off the zombies as if they were cabbages. Noticing his members had stopped attacking, Jin Zuyan asked, "What are you all looking at, still not getting to work?" The moment they heard his words, everyone came back to their senses and started working. The sound of explosions and colorful lights lasted for more than 2 hours before everything finally calmed down. When Jin Zuyan burned the last zombie's corpse into a pile of ash, the sun finally set on the western horizon.